G'day guys, Nord here from FloNo Trail. On our channel we normally produce trail running content, and as part of that we often include a map to show you guys where we're running and to give you a better idea of the terrain that we're running through. So that's what I want to do today, take you through behind the scenes really of how we animate the maps that we include in our videos and show you that it's actually pretty easy to do. So I will roll the intro and grab a cup of tea, and I'll see you back here in a second. Alrighty, so let's jump straight into it. I'm here in Premiere Pro. I've imported a few clips and I've put the map in there so you'll see what we're trying to produce here at the end of it all. So just a couple of clips of us here running through the bush, and then the map to show you where we're actually heading off to. So I've got myself a map here, imported it, and I will drag that over to the position in my sequence where I want to include the map. What I will do though is first of all decide how long it is going to be. This is pretty important because it's going to be a little bit more difficult to change the length of it in After Effects once we've started fiddling around with it. If you're editing to the music, that's going to be reasonably simple, and it depends actually too on how much you're going to show and how quickly you want that map animation to take place. So I've dropped it into the sequence over the top of the adjustment layer so that any grading or corrections, color corrections or cropping or whatever doesn't apply to the map itself. So from here, that's our work in Premiere Pro pretty much done, and we need to head over to After Effects. So I'll right click on this and replace the map with an After Effects composition. And here we are now in After Effects. We've got our map, we're pretty much ready to go. We just need to find ourselves the starting point and start labeling our starting point. And to do that, we're going to head up to the layer, new shape layer, or do what I do, and let's right click in the composition box down here and select new shape layer. We're going to have to add something here because at the moment we've got nothing in there, so we're going to add a rectangle. We're going to go into rectangle path and we're going to uncheck this constrained proportions box so that we can increase the size of it. You'll notice at the moment, of course, we've actually got no fill or content to that, so we can add in a fill. The color, I'm not too keen on the red, so we will change that to a black and round off those corners. That's us pretty much done with that first layer. We're going to add another shape layer. This time the shape layer is going to be an ellipse, and we need some fill on that as well, and not really too interested in the color, but I'm going to reduce the size of that rectangle, of that ellipse down so it fits nicely over in the rounded off corners of our rectangle. So I'll hit P and we can shift that circle over so that it fits nicely in there. Now we don't want a red dot inside a rounded off rectangle. We want to make that a hole so it looks a bit like a tab. So I will go into this track matte options here. If you don't see that, you need to go down and click toggle switches and modes, and we're going to select alpha inverted matte, which gives us a nice little hole in there now. Once we have got that, let's label this by clicking Command T, and we can label that as Hobart and drop that in here. Alrighty, so we have now got ourselves a tag. Best to keep this as tidy as possible, so we can select all of those, right click and pre-compose them if you don't have a shortcut for that already. Let's call that our start and OK. Now you'll notice that if we click on our map and press P to move the position of the map around, that tag doesn't actually stay where we want it to. So what we're going to have to do is click this pick, whip and drag it onto the map so that when we move now our position, those stick pretty nicely together. It doesn't look too three-dimensional at the moment, so what we will do is add in a nice drop shadow. The drop shadow as it comes in is a little bit too close, I think, and a bit too dark, so let's drop the opacity down to, I think 43% works pretty well here, and maybe move it just a little bit further out. So once we've got that, we can hit P again or just drag it over to where we want the start to be. Now, instead of actually having to redo that, let's select those two layers, go back to our composition, put them in here, and we can label this. This is going to be our destination. In our case, we're looking at Mount Patrick, so I'll type in here Mount Patrick, drop that into the middle, and we can pre-compose those and relabel it as Patrick. Maybe a drop shadow again we need. So right click on that, add a drop shadow, same 43%, I think would be pretty good for the opacity, and just move that distance out a little bit further. Alright, once we've got our destination and start tags, all we need to do is to move that tag over to where our destination is. So I'll drag the map across before I link it to the map. Once we've got it over our destination, we can now take the pick whip and attach it to the map. And our next job is to animate the path. So I'll zoom in a little bit to our start, select our pen tool by hitting G, and start marking in, just with a few clicks of the pen, the path that we've taken. I'll finish working my way through this and fast forward through that so that you don't have to sit through that. While we're at it, take the pick whip and link that to the map so that when we move the map, that path is going to be moved with it. And while we're at it, we may as well add in a bit of a drop shadow at the same 43%. Once we've got our path marked in, we can go back through and just round off some of these corners by option clicking them, or Alt, I think, in PC, or we could have done that just by clicking and holding when we'd started. Alright, so the only thing for me to do is to take the path layer, rename it as path, and move it underneath the tags so the tags sit over the top of those. We will zoom out a little bit on the map by hitting S and scaling out just a little bit. Alright, so our next job is to take the path itself and animate the path. I'll add in a trim path, open up the trim path tab, and set a keyframe for 100% at 4 seconds. Moving back to the start, we will take that 100% down to 0. And so we now play that through, we'll see that we get an animated path moving through from the start through to the destination. But at this stage we've got no real map animation, and half of the path is off the map. So what we need to do now is to add a null object and head down to toggle switches, select all, and make each layer 3D. We need now a camera, so a new camera. I have got here a 24mm preset which works pretty well, so I will use that, and I will parent the camera to the null object, and the null object is what we are going to move. What we're going to do at this stage is we've got our path animation, we just now need to make it all feel a little bit more three-dimensional. So we've got a null object, we've got a camera in, and what we're going to do is to move that camera over the top of the map pretty much as you would do if you were filming a map itself. And we want to animate that camera so that it follows the path of that we ran. So we are going to click this little clock for position, scale and orientation, making sure our time indicator is right at the very beginning. We're going to move our camera over to using the position to where we want that to start. In my case, it's about here. I'm going to stay fairly zoomed out, and I want my animation to start probably at about 1 second. What I like to do here is to make the whole thing just seem a little bit more three-dimensional, is to animate the movement of the map over the first second. So I'm going to take the X orientation and just flatten the map out so that it does look a little bit more three-dimensional. So our animation then in the first second will start to look like this while path is moving and animating here nicely and the map is moving with it. But there's no real camera movement yet, so what we need to do is head over to 4 seconds, which is where our path animation finished, and we're going to drag our position for the null object over to the destination. Now, if the destination as on your map is, as in my case, pretty much on the edge of the map, you'll notice that up here in the top left-hand corner, we're starting to get to see the edges of the map. Now, you could put some other background in there. What I like to do is to head over to Effects and Presets. I've already typed in Reptile. I'm going to take this Reptile effect and drop it onto the map itself. What we will get is then a folding out of the map so that we don't really see that we've come to the edge of it here. To do that, we need to select the unfold option and we need to expand out. In my case, I need to expand out the left of the map so that we can't see we've reached the edge of it. Take it up to a couple of thousand and we shouldn't have a problem. Righto, so our animation then has been a fairly simple one. We've got, as I scroll through it, we've got a fairly straightforward, a fairly linear kind of a movement of the map, which doesn't look too great just yet. So I'll move somewhere into the middle. I'll select the null object so I can see the path. I'll select my pen tool and click in the middle there, go back to my pointer and just put a little bit of a curve into this path. We can adjust the ends of it a little bit too, and if we can render that out and preview it, we should see a slightly better animation. Alright, so that's starting to look a little bit better, but I think we can improve that a little bit. We will take all of our keyframes and we will ease them by hitting F9 on a Mac. We could play around with those a little bit using the graph function, but I think we'll leave that for today. We can right click, add in a light. We'll add in first of all an ambient light. Intensity, take it down maybe to 55% for the moment. You'll see that it's come in now fairly dark, even though we've put in a light, but we're going to address that in a minute by adding another light, in fact a spot, and that spot 55% is probably also okay for now. We want to make sure our time indicator here is right at the beginning and hit transform. We're going to hit a keyframe here, hit the clock for point of interest and position, and just make sure that our point of interest, we can move the light over maybe just a little bit so it's almost directly over. or to the side maybe of our tag, of our starting point, and make sure that the point of interest is shining directly where we want it to be. So we're kind of spotlighting our starting point. If we head then over to towards our destination, we can see that the light stays pretty much where it was. So we're going to need to move that light with our camera and its point of interest as well, so that it is now illuminating our destination. All right, so we are pretty much finished here. Let's head back into Premiere Pro, render that out, and have a look and see what we have come up with, whether there's any final tweaks that we might need to make. Let's play the whole thing through and see whether we've managed to come up with something that looked pretty similar to our original.
Feathers in my hair and braids around my waist.
Well, I think that turned out all right. If you liked the video and found it useful, hit that like button. Leave us a comment down below. Tell us what you think, whether you'd like to see more of this sort of thing or whether we should just stick to our normal trail running videos. Either way, love to hear from you in the comments below. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of this sort of thing and more trail running content, and we will see you next week.